Her voice answered the question. Before she even understood what she was about to say. And if you're someone who believes your words belong to your thoughts, you might want to stay with this story, because hers didn't wait for her anymore. The spring of 1901 in Oxford was quiet in a way that made conversations feel heavier than they should, as if every word carried more meaning, simply because of how still everything else was. Inside a narrow study room, filled with books and soft light from a single window, sat a woman named Marceline Vera, a woman known for her careful speech, her measured tone, and her habit of thinking before she spoke. That habit didn't last long. The moment it broke wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was small. So small that if she hadn't noticed it, it would have passed like any other conversation. She had been sitting across from a colleague, listening to a simple question. Nothing complex, nothing urgent. Something ordinary. The kind of question that required a short, thoughtful answer. And then she heard her own voice respond. Clear, complete. Before she had even formed the thought. I don't think that's correct. The words left her mouth with calm certainty, but inside, she hadn't decided them yet. Her mind caught up a second later, not with the choice, but with the realization that she hadn't made one. She paused slightly, her expression controlled, her posture unchanged, because reacting too quickly would have meant acknowledging something she didn't understand. Her colleague nodded, continuing the conversation as if nothing had happened, and that was the problem, because for everyone else, nothing had. But for her, something had shifted. Not in the world, inside her. She dismissed it at first, not carelessly, carefully. The mind sometimes moves faster than awareness. Words form before we notice them. That was what she told herself. It was logical, acceptable, and completely wrong because it happened again. Later that same day, a different question, a different tone. And once again, her voice answered. Before she reached the thought, yes, I remember. The words came smoothly, naturally, but the memory didn't arrive until after, as if her voice had accessed something before her mind did. That was when the fear began, not suddenly, but precisely. Because if speech could exist before thought, then thought was no longer in control. Days passed, and the pattern didn't fade. It strengthened. At first, the gap was small, barely noticeable. A second, then slightly more. Her voice began responding faster, more confidently, before her awareness could catch up. She tried to control it, slowed her speech, paused longer, avoided answering quickly, but it didn't matter, because the moment someone asked her something, the answer was already there, waiting. Not in her mind, but in her voice. That was when she started listening to herself differently. Not as a speaker, but as an observer, and what she noticed changed everything. The tone, the certainty, the way her voice responded. It wasn't hesitation, it wasn't thinking, it was knowing. But not her knowing, something else, something ahead of her. One evening, she tested it, alone. No one around, no conversation, just silence. She stood in front of the mirror, her reflection steady, her breathing calm, and she asked herself a simple question out loud. What are you thinking right now? For a moment, nothing happened. Then, her voice answered. You'll understand soon. Her breath stopped completely, because that wasn't her thought. Not just because she had informed it, but because it didn't feel like something she would. It felt external, not outside her body, but outside her control. That was when the fear changed, because it was no longer about timing, it was about ownership. Her voice didn't belong to her anymore, and whatever it belonged to was closer than anything else. After that, the delay increased, not in seconds, but in meaning. Her voice began answering questions she hadn't been asked yet, responding to conversations before they started, completing sentences before others spoke them. At first, people noticed, then they stopped questioning it. Because confidence often hides what doesn't make sense. She's quick, they said. Sharp, always knows what to say. But Marceline knew better. Because she didn't. Not anymore. She wasn't choosing her words. She was catching up to them. And then came the moment she couldn't ignore. A colleague approached her, beginning to speak. And before he finished, her voice responded. I already know. He stopped, confused, because he hadn't said anything yet. And for the first time, someone else noticed. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything she had experienced before, because now it wasn't just her, and that meant it was real. That night, she didn't try to stop it, didn't resist, didn't question. She simply listened, allowed it to happen, allowed her voice to speak, before she understood, and slowly, something became clear. The answers weren't random, they weren't separate. They were ahead, always ahead, not reacting, not predicting, but already existing, as if her words belonged to a moment she hadn't reached yet. And then she understood, not fully, not comfortably, but enough. She wasn't speaking before thinking, she was thinking after speaking. And now I want to ask you something. If your voice started answering before your thoughts, if your words belonged to something slightly ahead of you, would you try to slow yourself down, or would you be afraid that your thoughts were no longer leading at all? Tell me your answer in the comments. And if stories like this make you question control and identity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay for the next story.